This passage is directly linked to that which went before, but today just 3 short verses, Luke chapter 18, verses 15 to 17, which tell us this. People were also bringing babies to Jesus for him to place his hands on them. When the disciples saw this, they rebuked them. But Jesus called the children to him and said, "Let the children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Truly I tell you, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it." Now, this is a very short, straightforward, simple little episode in the life of Jesus, and what's going on the surface appears relatively straightforward. Parents bring their babies or their infants to Jesus, and we see the disciples actually rebuking those parents, and then Jesus in turn rebukes the disciples for rebuking the parents. And what I want to do is walk through this short passage, but we need to go through it carefully because I think there are some really interesting insights contained within just these few verses. So it opens by saying, well, in this translation from Luke, it says they also brought babies to him. Now, it's important to make note of the fact that this incident is also recorded in Matthew and Mark for us. What it says in Mark and in Matthew is that they bring children to him. Now, one commentator I read suggests that the word actually is a word that could be used of anything from a newborn baby up to about a child of 8 years old. So I don't think there's necessarily a conflict between the two different translations, between that of Matthew and Mark and Luke. But I think a useful modern term in using to describe the sort of the age group of these children is perhaps the term that we use today called infant. I think that's a sort of suitable compromise, if you like, that covers all eventualities. But what intrigues me here is that Luke says that he's brought these young children, infants, to him so that he might touch them. In other words, that he might lay hands on them. Now, it was customary at that time for parents to bring their small children to the local rabbi for him to bless them. And when he did, he would usually do that by laying hands on them. So it seems likely to me that's what's been talked about here. Now, for a moment, if we turn back to Matthew's account, in Matthew chapter 19, he records the same story. There's exactly the same incident that we're reading about here, I believe, in Luke 18, but there's a very slight difference. It says, "Then little children," plural, the word means plural, not one, "were brought to him that he might put his hands on them," and Matthew adds the additional phrase, "and pray." So I suspect that that's what's going on here. And if we return back to Luke, in the knowledge that we're familiar that this was a fact of what was known, that local rabbis would lay hands on children if they were brought to them by the parents and bless them. And that blessing would take the form of a prayer. But I would like to suggest that all of us in our everyday lives, we actually ought to be doing this sort of thing. If you don't even have children yourself, and if you're not married, you still need to bless and pray for other children. In fact, I would go so far to say as if you want to be Christ-like, then part of being Christ-like is in fact praying for children.